Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Donovan. I'm a practice director here with the McKinley Advisors, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Association Executive Leadership Panel titled Accelerating Industry Workforce Development. The professional landscape, as many of us know, is evolving rapidly across industries, with organizations facing critical workforce challenges, including talent shortages, retention issues, changing skill requirements, and succession planning concerns. McKinley conducted research in partnership with ASAE last summer to explore the impacts of changing conditions and learned that 75% of association respondents are facing workforce shortages right now. And 85% of those anticipate those challenges are going to take 5 to 10 or more years to reverse. In response, associations are taking proactive steps to support their members and their industries. Today, we're going to hear from three association leaders that have created comprehensive frameworks, research initiatives, and resources to address these challenges. I'd like to introduce our three panelists today. First, from the National Rural Water Association, NRWA, we have Amber Jackson. She is the Apprenticeship Project Manager for NRWA. In her role, she focuses on federally funded projects to support the NRWA apprenticeship program, including direct technical assistance to state associations with program development and implementation. She previously created strategic partnerships to support business and industry as Director of Workforce Development for Workforce West Virginia. NRWA is confronting critical workforce shortages in an essential infrastructure sector where over half of professionals plan to retire within the next 10 years. From the National Athletic Trainers Association, I'd like to introduce Tamisha Logan. She's the Interim Executive Director for NATA. Throughout her career, she has provided organizational leadership for national and global nonprofit organizations. Her leadership at NATA has led to significant improvements, including increasing the overall market opportunity for athletic trainers, strengthening partnerships to advance NATA's mission, and enhancing overall operational effectiveness. NATA is working to support athletic trainers by addressing compensation disparities, work-life balance concerns, and career mobility in a healthcare profession that is experiencing significant workplace transitions. And finally, last but not least, we have Brian Savoy from the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. Brian is the Senior Vice President of Education and International Programs for RAPS. Brian is responsible for RAPS conferences, in-person and online workshops, and credentialing programs. He is the current Vice President of the Association of Graduate Regulatory Educators and is a past board member of the Producers Guild of America National Capital Region. RAPS has recently focused on creating a structured competency framework to support career development in a complex, highly specialized field requiring continuous adaptation to evolving regulation. Each of these organizations represents different sectors of our workforce, but they share a common purpose: strengthening their workforce through strategic initiatives that enhance professional development, create clear pathways, and address critical industry challenges. So welcome all. Thank you for joining us today and your willingness to share your experiences with us. I want to start out by talking a little bit about the changing workforce. At McKinley, we're seeing industries facing a variety of challenges resulting from shifting demographics and changing professional values and career drivers. In workforce research that I mentioned at the start of the program, changing demographics was named the primary driver of workforce shortages by 70% of association executives. Amber, I'm going to start with you. Your 2024 industry study revealed that 57% of rural water professionals plan to retire within the next decade, and only 29% of organizations feel confident that they can fill those operator vacancies within the next 6 months. What does this impending workforce shortage mean for your field, and how is NRWA working to address it?
The percentage of shortage is just significant. It's not something that wasn't unknown, but the data to support it as far as the survey results and actually identifying the areas of concern and the specific percentage based on the individuals who completed the survey was definitely alarming. So internally, National Rural Water continues to analyze the data as a whole to develop a plan to help support the state associations, the rural water utilities, PSDs, so that we can have an effective plan in addressing the water shortage, water operator and wastewater operator shortage. We are really looking at the data and as a whole and potentially looking at how we can use it for leverage as far as discussing funding that could support workforce development programs, specifically the registered apprenticeship program. That National Rural Water has national guideline standards registered through the Office of Apprenticeship that has successfully trained. I believe we're over 1,000 at this point with 500 completed the program. So we're really focused on developing that, enhancing the curriculum, the training, promoting that, and again, looking at the data as a whole as far as the retirement age and the demographics, and hopefully be able to transition that data to the state associations and in collaboration develop an efficient plan to address those issues.
And Amber, I want to just quickly follow up and ask if you could share just briefly what rural water professionals do, like who is that group of individuals?
The group that we are focused on is the smaller systems. So normally under 10,000 connections as far as the systems, and that's across the nation. So we're looking at water and wastewater operators, and that's the majority of what we're focused on as far as workforce development with the registered apprenticeship program. At this point, there are multiple other programs that are supported in the rural utilities sector through national with federal funding that helps assist in those programs and promote and ensure things move smoothly for those rural communities.
Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I think a lot of people may not even be aware of the fact that there are people who are working in that space. Tamisha, I want to move to you. And we know that I think many people are very well aware of the fact that the healthcare landscape is evolving rapidly, especially for early career professionals. What are some of the key factors influencing career satisfaction and retention for professionals entering fields like athletic training? And what kind of strategies are NATA considering to support and retain this important group?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So, I think that, as you said, the landscape is definitely changing, right? And I think career satisfaction is being shaped kind of like, I would say, by financial, structural, cultural pressures, all of that. For NATA specifically, so in 2023 was the last time we do a salary survey ever so often, every 2 to 3 years. And so through the data, what we found is that nearly 2/3 of ATs under the age of 40 were considering, leaving the profession, right? And it came down to pay, it came down to work-life balance, unstable hours. And I think one of the things that we've talked about, which, it may be one of the only gifts of COVID, if you ask me, is the introspective look that we all have taken around what's important to us and how we want to spend our time. So for our profession, we have, the profession is what we would, consider relatively young. 66% of ATs are under the age of 40. Nearly a half have been certified for less than 10 years. So early career experience kind of defines our field right now. So retention and growth, we definitely have to start there. I think if you then take it a step further and look at some of the drivers, the foresight drivers around things like talent drought and the new gen professionals, these trends predict intensifying workforce shortages. And we see it, and a shift toward purpose-driven careers and things like that. So, I think in all, today's professionals are wanting, and this is what we're experiencing. They want the autonomy, they want the growth opportunity, they want the meaningful impact. They don't just want the job. And so some of the strategies that I think have been probably most helpful for us is a continued focus on expanding the career flexibility and opportunity within our setting. I mean, within athletic training. So athletic training now spans over 10 course career settings. Where it began in sports, it's now expanded into a host of industries, right? And that continues to be a focus for us to educate around the career transferability of the athletic training profession. So helping them explore new pathways. So we're hitting it from both angles. where we are working with our members and working with those in the profession to understand what's available there, and then also working to continue to expand that opportunity. There's an initiative that we are literally advocating for right now that specifically targets our tactical athletic trainers and hope to keep them supporting our nation's military, particularly the military of soldiers. So for us, it's about expanding career flexibility. I think the other thing that was a focus in our last strategic plan was we're not just member advocates, we're engaging in system level advocacy. And what that means is working with healthcare systems, working with these entities through interprofessional partnerships and relationships that have access and influence, either decision-making authority or they have influence to things like better pay, clearer roles, sustainability, some of those things that we know are root cause. And investing in early careers support, I think has also been a strategy of focus for us. So from things like our mentorship program to early leadership pathways to even adopting a new employer-based membership model to kind of reduce financial barriers and foster more belonging among our young professionals. So if I, just from a big picture perspective, there's a driver that's called More Human Humans in the Foresight driver series. And, as automation rises, I think the value of human skills, empathy, adaptability, collaboration is going to become more vital. And we see our profession winning in that lane. So, our job is going to be to ensure that they're seen, supported, and do what we can to kind of address some of the root causes of what we saw in the data.
Yeah, you're referring to the association, or I'm sorry, ASAE Foresight Works.
Yes, ASAE Foresight Works drivers. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think the more human one in particular is very interesting because you think about how I think we are seeing this across a number of fields where people are just more and more interested in like reconnecting with each other and kind of shifting, not necessarily shifting away from technology, but understanding that there's a role there for that, but there's also an opportunity to connect with, each other human to human. Thank you for mentioning that. Brian, we know that RAPS worked to bring its competency framework up to date following significant technological, regulatory, and cultural changes in the market. The framework defines 4 distinct professional levels. How do organizations and individuals use these levels to create clear advancement paths for regulatory professionals?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. I think just to give some context, because I think all associations and organizations are a bit different. RAPS is an organization of 35,000 regulatory professionals. It's not anybody who's working in regulatory. Regulatory can impact banking, aviation, any number of cases. We're focused specifically on healthcare regulatory affairs around the globe. So these are people working within agencies, government organizations, in academia, and also in industry, looking to ensure that therapeutic products, whether they're pharmaceuticals, medical devices, diagnostics, are compliant with international regulations for those products. And education is a big, steep requirement for people who are working in that field. The average regulatory professional is engaging in 80 hours of professional development each and every year. And I mean, just about that for a second. It's 2 weeks that they are spending focused on education. So for somebody in my role, it's great because we are constantly appreciated. And when I say we, I'm referring to my team, because there is such a high need out there. The competency framework really serves as that foundation guidepost for where are we going, how do we do it, and are we doing this in the right way? And when I say that it's that foundation, it really serves not only as a foundation for our association, but for a number of different people who are serving in different roles. So you talk about the professional levels. The competency framework, as it's been built out, is now divided into 4 professional levels that kind of walk through somebody's professional life. So if you think of level 1, that's really somebody who's just coming into the career. the framework breaks out and goes through a bunch of different representative job titles, but you might think of it as like an associate or an assistant or a specialist would be in at that level 1 position. Level 2 is focusing on that, on that manager. Level 3 is a director, and level 4 is really vice presidents, chief regulatory officers, and there's quite a bit of variability in the titles that exist. But when you look at the framework, I think one of the things that was done really well in this latest update was not simply saying these are the competencies at any given level, but also really talking to how competencies evolve across a career. So, you may, if we're looking at training competencies, you may be training small groups, like 1 or 2 other people. You may be training a peer if you're working on a training competency early on in your career. And as you evolve, as you're a director, you may not be focused on direct training activities, but what you may be doing is working on setting out what is the rubric for that success. What does that look like? And I think that's one of the ways that we see that it's really strongly utilized and helps track that. Utilization, I think, is a key piece of this. It helps individuals track and manage their own professional growth, but also I said that those allied fields are out there. So people who are working in an HR capacity with regulatory professionals, it really helps them develop job descriptions for people who they're hiring. It also helps in as far as those annual reviews that are focused. So bringing in line managers, helping them put together professional development plans at the start of the year for their staff, and helps them identify, if they have high performing staff, what's going to help them get to the next level. If they have staff that is, that they may see need remediation, it also helps them identify specific competencies so that they can provide more actionable information that helps them move those forward.
Thanks, Brian. I thought one of the interesting things too about your particular group is that you tend to have professionals entering the regulatory affairs career at varied levels. They might start at a kind of a very early level of their career. They might often come in mid-career from a different not a healthcare background, but maybe they worked in pharmaceuticals or device manufacturing or something like that. And so they're, in a way, it sounds like the competency framework kind of really level sets for what is expected of a regulatory affairs professional, acknowledging that folks are really coming into the field from all different spaces within healthcare.
Yeah, you make
agree with
very
that?
good points on that, Christy. I mean, greater than 50% of people who are entering regulatory affairs are doing so mid-career. And I think one of the things about this is nobody who's coming into regulatory affairs probably knew that regulatory affairs existed when they were going into college or university. And so that career transition pathway is a significant one. The framework may not help them individually in those earliest engagements, but what it does do is it helps the organizations that they're working with identify ways that they can help people transition. And I think that's one area where one of the reasons why we continue to invest in this type of work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to shift to talk a little bit about employment conditions. In the workforce research I referenced earlier, almost half of association executives reported that a lack of desirable work conditions, things like work-life balance, demanding roles, and remote work, are driving workforce shortages in their fields. Working with many of our clients, we're hearing that the operating environment in many fields has shifted, resulting from the impacts of COVID, new cultural expectations, I think many of which are tied to the changes that we saw after COVID, and emerging new technology. Tamisha, I'm going to start with you. Career mobility has increased significantly across healthcare and the allied health professions. What insights have emerged about what today's professionals are seeking in terms of work environment, compensation, career growth, and how can associations leverage this information to advocate for more competitive and sustainable employment models?
Yeah. So for us, I think well, just for healthcare in general and likely most associations, we have definitely entered like a new era. I think gone are the days where someone just kind of stays for 20 years and that's where they are. So I think career paths today are just definitely more fluid and more purpose driven, more values based, specifically speaking to our association. In a study that we did, 38% of athletic trainers actually changed job settings within the past 5 years. We did this study in 2023 and found that 38% changed. And then 25% were planning to change. And the motivators behind that, which I'm hearing are relatively consistent in healthcare, have to do with what you talked about: the balance, the stability, the growth, the ability to work, but also to live, better pay, things like that. So I think now, for NATA, the other piece of that is when you look at the demographics within our profession is 58% of the individuals in our profession identify as women, right? And then you've got the majority of our overall profession that's under 40. So things like flexibility, equity, career visibility, they're no longer perks, they're expectations. And I think that's the first, overall mind shift, kind of taking it more broadly and looking at just millennials and Gen Z and the motivating factors behind value alignment, personalized development, flexibility. So for us, I think they're just looking at this particular sector, they are less likely to accept traditional career structures and more likely to exit and to consider other moving other career paths, which leads to the mobility challenges or folks not sticking around much longer. I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, and I'll talk a little bit about why. So I think for us, how we have navigated that is through workforce advocacy. Like, for member engagement is no longer just a driver of what our focus is. It is, how are we advocating for the workforce in general? I talked a little bit about the system level change, working with interprofessional associations. This is huge for us. It's how do we get into these entities and make the case on behalf of our members. The other thing that I think we have done really well is leveraging data as a tool for the change. We collect a lot of information to be the voice of our members, and so we're equipping the decision makers with hard data on compensation, burnout, workforce movement. I think one of the benefits of associations and a gift to our members is that we can say what they can't as individuals and in these different employment environments. And we've done that several years ago when we kind of went down this path. I think one of the biggest initiatives that we did was going to our members and getting some real clear market research around the why, doing a root cause analysis to understand why the conditions, why they felt this way. And then taking it a step further and also working with SME, subject matter experts within our association, leaders within our association, to help our system level influencers and decision makers with real solutions as to what they can do to bring about the change that's needed to retain people in their field. I hate to take it back to foresight, but we spent a lot of time looking at that research and trying to understand our current reality. The talent drought is real, right? Like, I mean, forecasts show that the long-term labor shortage, that's a real reality. And so, employers, I think we're just going to, as associations, we have a role, and I'll talk about that in a second, but employers will need to compete. And that's just the reality of it. They're going to have to compete. And where we have the advantage is that we can help equip them with the information. Associations can lead by helping members navigate this reality, but I think also institutions, we can support institutions in their absolute need to adopt it. And there's one more point that I would make that I think is something that we have to consider. There's the gender equity in practice here. So recognizing the gender influences, things like salary, things like compensation. Gender also has a factor in benefits and things like that. And so we we've tried to be intentional about understanding the why behind some of the data that we saw, particularly in 2023, and ended up launching, this was under the direction of our past president, a whole initiative around educating not just those that identify as women, but our entire profession on the role that they play in gender equity and equipping them. You know, one of the things that we found is a root cause has to do with negotiation skills. Those are often, you know, not lacking or not as refined as our men counterparts. So I think that has been one of the things that we've looked at as well. And then lastly, I'll just say the seeing mobility is positive. You know, our thing is moving around. When you say 38% changed the settings, yes, they did, but here's the positive. They stayed in the profession. And that kind of goes back to the first conversation of creating the opportunity, you know, leveraging advocating around the transferability of skill set within our setting. So they stayed within our profession. So, you know, I'd just say that the profession for us definitely is evolving, and so is the workforce. And our role is using data and using our voice, being the voice of our members to help to shape that to something that's a little bit more sustainable, and that considers where things are going and what employers are going to have to do to compete in that space.
Thank you. You know, it strikes me, Brian, I'm going to come to you next. It strikes me that some of the things that Tamisha talked about, in some ways, kind of translate into the work that you guys are doing as well around competencies and helping to shape, maybe, dare I say, shape the role of what a regulatory affairs professional can do for their companies, and what those expectations might be. I think you talked a little bit about that earlier with regard to the employers and engaging them in this and how they might use this tool. I'm going to shift course slightly and say, we know that the regulatory landscape, especially in the last few months, just from the things that we're seeing in the media, is constantly evolving and probably even more rapidly now. How does RAPS help professionals navigate the continuous learning requirements of the field? And, I might even add to that, if you don't mind, on the flip side, like, how do employers see that? How are they supporting that?
Yeah, I think that the way that RAPS helps our membership navigate this is I'd say varied and myriad. And this may seem like, as an association, we're just being humble on this. I don't know that we're shaping the profession. I think what we are doing, and I think it's when we're best, we're really a mirror of the profession. And so, we utilize our talents, which, we have one SME on our staff. But we utilize our talents as association professionals to help the profession best reflect itself. And I think the competency framework is really one model of doing that. When you look at how you deal with rapid evolution, the competency framework is not necessarily well suited for that. It really helps you understand the context in which that evolution or revolution is going on. And because this is really viewed as a global model, the way that it helps people in different regions understand it is really different. RAPS in the past few years has expanded into new regions. We're doing more in the Middle East. We're starting to move into Asia and Australia, and the way that regulatory professionals see themselves is a little bit different in different regions. In the Middle East, for instance, they still see that the framework is valuable, but 90% of the products that are being brought to market in the Middle East are imports. They're coming from other places. They're coming from Europe, China, they're coming from India. So the challenges are different, but the framework still fits that model there as well. When you talk about the rapid changes that are going on right now, I'd say the issues in the US are the information that regulatory affairs professionals might depend on in the US that would be coming out from FDA has slowed a great deal. There are less people in communications roles in FDA right now. There's less information about guidance that's coming out. So that all feeds into the system. So right now what's happening is professionals are depending on one another. So what we've seen is more and more there's this reliance on one another, and the systems that RAPS has in place to allow people to connect with one another are being utilized in a great deal. I think that I was mentioning this earlier, that we're in this period of I'd say revolutionary change in the regulatory space. What is driving this disruptive innovation is anything from governmental changes in approach, not just in the US, but globally. When one large economy makes a change, all of the other economies kind of shift around and make changes to benefit themselves, but in other cases, not so much. But there's also the technology disruptive change. Is AI is impacting the products that our members companies are bringing to market. AI in diagnostics is helping people get more informed about what's going on in their bodies, and precision medicine is helping deliver medications in the right dosage at the right times, and that's all being powered in the background by AI and machine learning. But AI is also coming in to the operations side of regulatory affairs. So that's one of the areas where we had planned on doing an update of the competency framework last year, and we held off because it was my view that we were seeing one of these big changes in the field, and AI is behind a lot of that. So is it going to change the framework of the profession? No, but it may change the emphasis of how some of the competencies are implemented and focused on.
That makes sense. Thank you. Amber, the NRWA study revealed that 55% of water industry professionals are on call 24/7, with operators often performing tasks outside of their job descriptions. How is NRWA using this data to lead efforts on improving work conditions and retention in the industry?
So we're still internally analyzing the data and evaluating how we can help the individual states associations address this with their membership as far as the rural utilities that are attached. So as far as specific plans or in a general plan to help address it across the nation, that isn't realistic. So we'll have a more detailed approach once we have that data analyzed and have the conversations at a state level. What NRWA is doing to help support the retention and kind of expansion of the registered apprenticeship program and engagement in the water and wastewater treatment training and kind of promoting the occupations. We have received 2 grants. The first one was from the U.S. EPA, the Office of Water and Office of Wastewater Management. It was an innovative water infrastructure workforce development grant program. With that grant funding, we're able to offer the apprentice that's attached to the water wastewater apprenticeship program, as well as the mentor that's assigned to that individual with the utility to help with the on-the-job learning component, an amount up to, I believe it's up to $10,000 in total for their engagement and completion of certain components of the registered apprenticeship program, as far as the required classroom and on-the-job learning hours that are attached to the standards. The second grant that we received was from the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship, the Apprenticeship Building America Round 2 funding. National Rural Water received that funding, and we are utilizing it to provide an incentive for new employers, rural employers, so systems under 10,000, to engage with the state associations to participate in the registered apprenticeship programs that offer the water and wastewater training, the structured programs to kind of address the shortage of workers in those utilities to help support the training. As far as the multiple task and being on call 24 hours, there is a variance of different reasons and cause and effect, obviously, as far as that goes. With the rural systems, sometimes the city or the municipalities or the towns don't have the funding to support a second individual as far as water treatment. That there could be a lack of interest as far as individuals wanting to pursue a career in that occupation, with the lack of knowledge of what that career pathway looks like. So we're looking at different avenues to help expand and promote through incentives, as well as just outreach and recruiting through various avenues, such as workforce development. So we're looking at those initiatives as well, but that's where we stand as far as the data and helping support the states individually to address that issue.
Thanks, Amber. I want to just ask a quick follow-up on that. The 2 grants that you talked about, are you guys in the process of executing on those now, or do you have any outcomes yet or early results?
We are in the process of executing. We're hopeful that we will have everything in play within the next month or 2, so we'll have some results in the near future.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, thank you. All right. Then actually, and Amber, I'm going to follow with one other question that came in the Q&A while I've got you. The question came from Susan. She's asking, who and how did you survey to get your data on percentage of retiring professionals versus those the percentage coming into the profession?
So the survey was directed through the state associations, the state rural water associations, mainly to the executive directors and any board members that we could communicate the survey being open, or an opportunity to help fill out or complete the survey to offer up workforce development information or data specific to their states. That was generated, and then asked that they send that information or the link for the survey, and definitely an explanation attached to what the survey's focus is, to their local utilities or association members, so that we could have a wide variety of individuals completing to understand specific state data as far as workforce, and the need for individuals to enter the workforce, and also identifying the individuals that are going to retire in a very short period of time.
Great, thank you. Shifting over to growth of the workforce, the professional workforce, research on Generation Z, and Tamisha spoke to this a little bit, I think already, is suggesting that they have a really strong desire for work that aligns with their personal values, that achieves meaningful outcomes, and that where they can collaborate with partners to achieve common goals. With the changing demographics that are impacting the workforce pipeline, especially due to baby boomer retirements, many associations are seeing an urgent need to support workforce development. On top of the sheer reduction in workforce numbers, we're also seeing that industries are struggling with a disconnect in knowledge transfer through mentoring and learning endeavors from the most experienced generation to the least or incoming generation. Tamisha, perception of the profession plays a critical role in long-term growth and recruitment. What are some of the ways that associations can elevate the professional outlook, build confidence in the future of the field, and better communicate the value of the profession to key stakeholders and future talent?
Yes. So, I think perception, shapes who joins the profession. It shapes who stays in our professions, and also how the public and the employers value the work, right? And so this was an area of real critical concern, I think, coming out of COVID for us, because a significant percentage of our profession did not feel very optimistic about the future, right? Coming off of the heels of COVID, there was a lot of things that happened in the healthcare industry, in all of our industries, but certainly healthcare. So, that's a signal, right? That wasn't a signal just for the NATA, but also, excuse me, for anyone invested. And then we've already talked a little bit about the workforce contraction, right? So we know that there's a shrinking youth population. So this tells us, it shows that the challenge is bigger than just retention. It really is about our ability to fill our pipelines. Who's coming next, right? And
Mhm.
so I think the first step there is understanding the role, the value proposition of your profession. For example, ours, what is the value proposition of athletic training to the next generation? And how are we going to articulate that in an effective way? And so from a strategy standpoint, for us, I think it goes back to fixing the root cause. And I touched on this a little bit, but when you talk about perception and perception isn't exactly where you believe it should be, then the question is why, right? And making sure that we're not just looking at symptoms. And this was something that we encountered very recently, I would say probably 2 to 3 years ago, when we were really examining some of the root cause concerns around some of the exit in the sports related settings. Why are people leaving? There were a lot of ideas and anecdotes that were thrown around. And one of the things that we really wanted to be very responsible with is the why. And it's not to say, for example, there were some conversations around workforce shortage. Well, that could be a reality, but is that why you're receiving an exit of people coming out? And so, it's lived experiences. So we spent some time understanding why, working with our subject matter experts within that particular setting to get the reasons, and then share those reasons through our system level changes and partnerships, and then share also the solutions. The other thing that we're looking to do, and this is as of recent, it's from our last strategic plan, but over the past 12 months or so, is how do we modernize the narrative and how we talk about our association, right? And understanding where this future workforce wants to be. We believe that our profession is positioned very well. If you look at the demand, the demand projected for our profession, it's higher than average. So that's very positive. The question is, how do we connect the dots with the future professional? And so part of that is how we tell our story. And so we are evolving in how we do that. We've brought on a partner to help us do that. How are we sharing some of the real stories? What I appreciate most about this profession is that it's hard work. It really is. It's healthcare, but it's hard work. Their lives are changed because of some of the things and the relationships that athletic trainers have. And so we're being a little bit more diligent with that. I talked a little bit earlier about telling our story through data. I don't, if there's one thing that we have done, I think well over the past couple years, is being more disciplined about collecting the data from not just saying we're valuable, but how do you prove you're valuable, right? Especially if you're expanding into settings that it's really about the P&L, right? When it goes to clinical settings and you go to some of those more business models, at the end of the day, it's going to end up on the desk of the CFO, right? And the CFO, they see numbers. It's not impact and patient care always, that they're looking through the lens of. And so it's our ability to tell our stories through real data, to advocate, for the things that we know are going to change the perception, or going to address the concerns in the perception. And here's another topic that is going to be very complex in how we as associations navigate this, with some of the recent EOs related to DEI. So here's what we know from NATA. DEI for us, it directly connects to our pipeline. So right now, when we examine certified ATs, 80% of them identify as white, right? So we face a sustainability issue, not just a diversity issue. This is about how are we showcasing our profession to all in a way that's going to help us be able to meet the demand of the future. So, inclusive, professions, and again, this goes back to some of the foresight research with Foresight Works. Inclusive professions are more attractive. They're considered more trusted. They're considered more prepared. And so how we're navigating that is when we examine, we are, like most of us are, we're examining our strategy and our how. How are we delivering in a way that truly is for all, that all individuals feel that they are a part? And then we're breaking that down to say, okay, in our quest for all, where are our gaps? Where are those areas where we're falling short in achieving our overall goal of all? Because it truly, it's much more than a moral imperative. It is a sustainability imperative for, those of us trying to recruit into our profession and keep them going. So, I would say my final point on this would be, associations, we don't just represent our members anymore. I think we have to um, almost help coerce, and I want to say coerce, influence and support these sectors that are employing them. And because it's kind of like, it's a circle, right? The experience that they have with those employers shape the profession, the perception of the profession, which impact our ability to recruit into the profession and retain into the profession. So, our work, I think, has just gotten a little bit more interesting during these times, and that's okay, right? It's job security, I guess you could
Yes,
say.
that's the truth. I know that we, this is very similar to what you were saying. I think creating a welcoming environment in our associations is also another way to be inclusive and help
Yeah.
people build the community around them that they need to be successful in their jobs. And if they aren't finding that community, if they're not finding the support they need to be successful, they will likely shift into some other, role or profession.
Part. Yes, I agree. And I will say this, if I can, that's another way we can help our fields is by helping those that employ those in our professions understand how to navigate the DEI conversation as we all learn and we grow. Just like you said, that it doesn't have to be as complex as we want to make it. It really is about how do we ensure that all individuals are okay raising their hand, and then breaking it down into where those opportunities for growth and focus, and then kind of build from there.
Yeah, so true. Thank you. Amber, your study indicated that rural water professionals primarily learn about the industry through acquaintances and job postings. How is National Rural Water Association working to expand awareness of career opportunities among younger generations?
So with the acquaintance piece coming into play as far as the results of the survey, I feel it's necessary to say that a lot of the rural water utilities are generations of families that are attached to the industry. So there is a wealth of knowledge as far as the industry with water and wastewater treatment that's being handed down to the younger generations within that family structure. And it's really across rural water, it's really more of a close-knit family, lots of networks and supports through emergency response and a variety of different other things that could impact rural water. So I think that is the main point to make regarding the acquaintances. As far as the job postings and how we're looking to expand past that, we are fortunate enough to have funding from USDA as well as USDL employment and training. That funding is focused on supporting an apprenticeship coordinator with the state associations in 36 of the states that we have registered apprenticeship programs registered with the respective state agencies or the Office of Apprenticeship in that state. So those individuals are helping National Rural Water expand the knowledge as far as the opportunities within the industry. Those individuals are tasked with recruiting and supporting employers, apprentices, and the mentors across the board. So they're working with a lot of organizations and associations through workforce development and community resource entities across the board, as well as the school districts, the school guidance counselors, and educating individuals about the opportunity of employment, long-term career pathways in the water and wastewater industry. So that is really, we're looking to expand upon that with national support. Lots of information being shared through our social media outlets, our websites, and events that are being hosted and attended by those individuals, the apprenticeship coordinators, as well as the state association representatives. So it's definitely, there's a multitude of different things going on. Again, we're still analyzing the data internally and hope to have plans that we can help support this individual state associations more effectively across every result that we received with the data in hand, and addressing those issues and concerns based on that.
I want to ask, I know a lot of associations are thinking about how they can connect with earlier in the career path for prospective employees. And I know many of them are thinking about how they reach further and further into school systems to really create that awareness of it. And I'm curious if you are aware of at what point in their youth, maybe students are becoming aware of the fact that there is this field and opportunity?
It actually varies from state to state. I think that
Okay.
some of the states have opened, as far as the education systems have opened the door to education as far as career pathways and occupations to middle schoolers. So maybe sixth,
Okay.
seventh, and eighth graders, expanding into the career fairs that take place on my understanding, a pretty regular basis across the nation within the high schools. So those opportunities are there, and there's also outside resources as far as any clubs or engagements that or programs that youth are involved in, where we have the opportunity to kind of promote and educate on the occupations attached to the water industry.
Got it. Thank you. And Brian, how are educational institutions and employers using the RAPS framework to align curriculum and training programs with industry needs?
Yeah, Christy, it's an interesting piece. I think one of the things that, I've heard both with RAPS, but other associations that I've worked with on competency projects, is that there's this view that when the competency project is done, it's going to effectively be this map towards, education, aligning with education. And there is a component to that, but all educational institutions and industry organizations are a bit different. So for instance, for universities, that level one, that early professional set of competencies is going to be critical. And many of them, regulatory affairs is a relatively new field. It's about 50 years old. RAPS is almost 50 years old as well, so we've been around almost the entire time. And so university programs are just really starting to get set up. Some have been around for about 20 years, but there are new programs that are coming on all the time, and they're really looking at that level one set of competencies as something that they want to build their curriculum around. So that's one way of approaching it. I talked a little bit about the HR leaders. I went to a meeting with was a pretty large consultancy who had not heard of the framework before. And we went in and took a look at it, and he pulled up his HR management system and showed me how they were utilizing it. And he was immediately viewed this as a way that they could incorporate the competency metrics into the way that they assess their staff. So, met with them about a year later, just asking for an update on that. And that's exactly what they had done, is most of their team members who are consultants that they're sending out to client companies are at that level 3 level. But what it allowed them to do is put in some defined metrics. And then they were getting feedback from client sites about the performance of their consultants that they were able to utilize in an actionable form. And I think the other piece is this line manager function, is that, when you're not, I'd say not just doing those annual reviews, but it's also annual reviews, professional development planning. All of those tools are invaluable. But I think the one area that I think is not really captured here is what's the value to your association in doing this work. And I think for RAPS as an association, this really has helped us identify key gaps in what we're offering to people in the field. So, one of the things when we completed this work in 2021, as a department, we did a gap analysis. We, went and looked at everything that we were offering. We had about 250 offerings in any given year that we were providing out to the field. And we saw, we kind of went through and rated them against the domains, the professional levels, and then groupings of competencies, and really found that we were missing out on the leadership domain. And so that's been an area for, I'd say, the past 2 or 3 years where we've spent a lot of time in developing education materials for that area. So, there's the external stakeholders and how they utilize the frameworks, but also I think that associations need to recognize that we are a stakeholder in the development of these tools as well. And how are these going to guide our work for the future years?
Absolutely. Thank you. We are just about 5 minutes away from the end of this, and I wanted to, I have two questions left. I'm going to start with just kind of a rapid round robin of the three of you. One is, what are the other future workforce trends that you anticipate emerging in your industries, and how are you thinking about preparing your members for them? So I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to talk about an insight, one takeaway from this conversation today. So I'm going to start. Does anybody feel compelled to answer that right away? Or I can start with someone. Brian, how about you?
Sure. I'd say the future trends are, I know that not all associations are international in scope, but I think what we are seeing right now is this kind of shift in maturity in systems. So areas where we had, I mean, for most of my career, expected, developments in science and technology to come out of really about 5 or 6 regions, not 5 or 6 countries, but 5 or 6 regions. Those are shifting a bit. Investment is coming from new places, and approaches towards regulation are different in those areas. So I think that's one of the areas is as you're looking at your own environments, are there shifts occurring geographically? Are there shifts going on in the players that are involved? And how is that going to impact your own associations and how you engage with your memberships?
Thank you. Amber or Tamisha, I see you just unmuted. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm happy. Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah. So with the future trend, what we're kind of looking at and on a bigger platform is expansion of structured training programs through the registered apprenticeship model. I think that we're going to continue to see in the industry the need to expand upon the training opportunities to offer trainings in the career pathway, the different components up to specifically one that we're working on or looking at a broader spectrum at this point is a utility manager, which would manage the entire operation. So we have been working with an entity that we contracted with to perform a DACM analysis so that we can develop specific job competencies, looking at a chart with the specific duties and tasks associated, so we can begin the exploration of potential curriculum development to help support that component of the industry. I think that is crucial in where we're at right now.
Thanks, Amber. Tamisha.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that and say for NATA and just healthcare in general, I think the continued rise of tech integrated care delivery models. That is an AI, just adds a whole layer of that. I think that we are, again, COVID had a lot of crazy that it brought, but it also brought some very innovative changes. And so, I think we saw a lot of stuff happen during the COVID era to kind of boost this. But I think with AI, it's us, not just understanding how do we incorporate these new and expanded technologies into the delivery of care, but it's also looking at the going to the competency conversation that Brian's been talking about, and how do we prepare those that are coming into the workforce on how to, not fear it, but understand it and leverage it in ways that's going to be best for the patient. So I think that's definitely an area of concentration and focus that we have to do at our association. And I think anyone in healthcare that's not doing it and looking at the risk, we got to start talking more about not to scare us, but to prepare us for risk and concerns around the AI integration in healthcare.
Thank you. I'm going to go in the same order and ask this last question. If our audience took one insight away from today's conversation, what do you hope that is? Brian.
Yeah, I'd say the one thing is there's rapid change, learning, kind of across our fields. When you think about the 3 associations here, the groups that we're serving are really different. But I think the one takeaway that I'm hearing is we've got rapid change going on everywhere. Some of it's driven by the fields, some of it's caused by, a changing workforce. And in order to adapt to it, you just need to be nimble. There are tools out there for all of us that can really help address the challenges that are out there.
Thank you. Amber.
I'm going to piggyback off Brian and just say that I think that that's important to just acknowledge the tools and resources and the different approaches at understanding the engagement or what the need is as far as the focus of your association or the occupations, so that you can effectively support the transitions, the needs as far as change, continuously adapting to the workforce.
Great. Thank you, Amber. And Tamisha.
And this is a true big piggyback off of Amber. I think it's just know the root cause. There is a lot of change, but spend the time and get the data to understand what is really happening, and start there when we start talking about solutions as to how we're going to move forward. Well, I think it starts with understanding root cause, be it there's people moving outside of your industry or moving within your industry. And I think also, like I think I said earlier, we've got to, see mobility as an opportunity. How might mobility be an opportunity for our profession? How might we re-examine what we're doing to make sure that if someone is moving from A to B, that B still keeps them, in the confines of our profession. And that's going to take us connecting with systems and advocating and making sure that we are elevating the transferability of what our professionals within our associations can do across different industries.
Tamisha, your root cause question reminds me of the 5 whys. That, if you want to really get to the root cause of something, you have to ask why 5 times.
5 times, 5 times.
Yep, yeah. So
solve the right
idea.
problem.
Exactly.
Solve the right problem. Yeah.
It takes a while to get to that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us, Amber, Tamisha, and Brian. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this afternoon, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk with you soon.